Thank you, Lily. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back. I hope that you enjoyed our morning's plenary and the federal committee updates. More information than we could actually squeeze in, so feel free to check back soon onto our website and you'll be able to see all of the slides and the recorded video of the federal updates. The next slide. So today, just in case you were not able to join the morning, I'm Alex Albanak. I'm the Associate Vice Provost for Research Administration at Johns Hopkins University and co-chair of the Federal Demonstration Partnership. Michelle?
And I am Michelle Masucci. I am the Vice President for Research at Temple University, and I am the co-chair of the FDP as the elected faculty representative.
Thank you. So just a quick introduction regarding the structure of FDP. We are a working organization, and all of the work is conducted under the auspices of several different committees. There's an executive committee, and in addition to that, we have operational and programmatic committees. The 4 operational committees are finance, membership, communications, and infrastructure. And they're filled with volunteers helping the FDP conduct business on an everyday basis. And then there's the programmatic committees, which are comprised of both subcommittees and working groups. And they address everything from general topical areas to specific short-term projects that would be under the work of a working group. Those include faculty committee, the Electronic Research Administration, finance, costing and audit, research compliance, and emerging research institutions. We've asked the programmatic committees today to put together some slides and to talk to you about what their current activities are and briefly touch on some of our past successes, but also talk about what we're looking to do and accomplish in the coming year or so, and hoping to spark some interest in some of our members to want to participate and volunteer. And we'll give you a little bit of information about that within each committee. Next slide, please. So for those of you that prefer a graphical display to get a better understanding, we keep an updated org chart on our website. And as you can see, we talk about the executive committee, which is essentially the overarching governing body of this organization. And it has federal members, it has institutional members, and we work together to help set priorities and look into how we're going to carry out our strategic plan. Michelle and I are both co-chairs of that executive committee. And then within that committee, they're the co-chairs of our programmatic committees and our operations committees, and I already went through those. And then you can see a selected list of the subcommittees that fall under some of our committees. We don't have depicted here the many working groups, but you will hear more about that as each committee provides their updates. So without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Michelle as the co-chair of FDP and also the chair of the faculty committee.
Thank you, Alex. Next slide, please. I'm very pleased to be with you this afternoon, and unfortunately my colleague Robert Nobles, who's the vice chair of the faculty committee, could not be here with us today, so I will be reviewing the faculty committee description and just some of the activities that we're involved in. Our plan for today is to go through these committee discussions to begin to give you an idea of the scope of the things that we're involved in at the FDP, and to begin eliciting your input in terms of the things that you might like to be involved in, or the committees that you would like to be involved in. In terms of the faculty committee, we actually have a dedicated forum tomorrow, which will be more interactive than today's session. So today I'm going to give kind of the highlights of what we're involved in, but tomorrow we actually have a session from 4:30 to 6, which is aimed at engaging the faculty representatives from our institutions. And for those of you who are joining us as new institutions, if you have a faculty member who's been designated, it would be really great if they were involved in that session. This is really a faculty to faculty conversation about how we would like to comport ourselves in terms of activities for the current phase. So we'll be going through kind of our sort of highlights of what we've done in the past and where we're heading, and then have the opportunity to engage the organization, engage in a conversation about what things we'd like to prioritize. Could I get the next slide, please? The structure of the faculty committee is a little bit unique for the FDP in that the faculty have not always been at the FDP. It wasn't until phase 4 that the faculty were actually invited as one of the 3 designated components of the FDP. So every institutional member has to identify a research administration, an ERA, and a faculty representative. So you actually have named representatives who are supposed to be working hand in hand with the research administration team on ensuring that the activities at FDP get socialized and harmonized at your home universities across multiple stakeholders. So the inclusion of faculty in the FDP was meant to do a better job of understanding what the faculty experiences are in terms of managing their federal awards, and also to make sure that the federal agencies have the opportunity to engage with faculty directly and learn about what their experiences are. As a result, the faculty committee is kind of combined both a program committee as well as a committee of the whole, meaning that every faculty representative is by definition a part of the faculty committee. We're small in numbers relative to some of the rest of the participants at FDP because, as I'm sure you're all aware, the primary role of the organization is to think about how to improve the quality of research administration. And so obviously we have a very heavy representation of a very dedicated group of research administrators from around the country. But that faculty role we think is really important because it helps us to think about how the activities that we're involved in affect the faculty. And it also gives faculty an opportunity to shape the conversation about what we should be focused on to reduce burden. So first thing to understand is that all named representatives are part of the faculty committee. At each FDP meeting, we actually have a meeting of the committee as a whole, and that will be happening tomorrow at 4:30. And the purpose of that meeting, because we are so small in numbers relative to the participants in the meeting. So in this meeting, we have over 750, almost 800 participants. A small number of that group will be faculty. And because we are small in numbers relative to the whole, what we try to do is canvass the FDP meetings and then talk as a group of faculty about our experiences and input, the places where we're making a difference, we hope, on the conversation that's happening across other committees. So I would characterize the faculty committee as a cross-cutting committee, and also one in which we're doing our best to canvass the many activities that are going on here. And we get involved in those things that have particular interest for us. We're coordinated by a steering committee. So for those faculty members who are co-chairs of the committee structure or liaisons to the FDP initiatives, we convene that group on a monthly basis to make sure that we are in conversation with each other about the ways in which activities are moving forward in the organization. So if you show the next slide, what I wanted to do is acknowledge the steering committee and what they're involved in. Next slide, please. Sorry, previous slide. That slide, thank you. So the way it works for us, both Alex and I are elected by our respective cohorts. I'm elected by the faculty, she's elected by the administrative and ERA reps. And so that's how we come to be the chair. I come to be the chair of the faculty committee. Involved in our group is John Hildebrand at the University of Arizona. He works at the National Academies and is our liaison, or I should say he's the International Secretary of the National Academies and is our liaison to the National Academies. And as we mentioned in the very first session, FDP is an activity of the National Academies, and we as the faculty group in particular are very keen to keep that relationship as close as we can. George Utz is the co-chair of the Communications Committee. He's at the University of Cincinnati. Jerry Cohen leads as the co-chair of JAD. And JAD is really focused in on many of the kinds of electronic solutions to grant submissions that we've all been talking about. Larry Sutter is the co-chair of the membership committee. Alice Young is a liaison to research administration. We're still seeking an administrative co-chair a faculty co-chair for that committee. Susan Sloan, who you saw earlier in the day, is the director of GWIR and caucuses in with our steering committee. Sandy Schneider is the former, what was at the time, vice chair of the FDP representing the faculty, and is now our lead scientist for the faculty workload survey, which I'll talk about in a moment. David Robinson is also a former vice chair of the faculty committee and is our liaison to the finance committee. Laura McCabe is our liaison to foreign influence. Jason Carter is agreeing to co-chair for us a brand new nominations working group where we hope to use that committee to help elicit input from all of you on what committees you'd like to be a part of. And Robert Nobles is my vice chair of the faculty committee and the co-chair of the infrastructure committee. You'll see a little asterisk by the names of the individuals who are also on the executive committee of the FDP. So the way it works for faculty is we're a committee of a whole. We try to canvass the FDP as an organization. These are the individuals at this time who we can tell you are working very closely together as a group to make sure that the faculty are well represented and communicating across those activities. And then a subset of us are on the actual executive committee. So I think that's a really big change in how the FDP functions, and certainly the change in the overall leadership structure is one of the big things that the faculty have been really hoping to see accomplished, and which resonates well with us. Now we could do the next slide. What I wanted to do is give you a list of some of the things that we're involved in, and again, we will talk about these in more detail tomorrow. First and foremost is that the faculty are responsible for implementing the faculty workload survey. Many of you have seen the results of that survey. That survey is the one that we conduct with members of our respective institutions who actually have federal awards in the given year that the survey is implemented. The purpose of that workload survey is to do a drill down on both what the effects of administrative burden are and how much time faculty actually spend on administrative burden. And as you know, our most recent workload survey showed that 44% of faculty effort involved in a grant is focused on administration. So that's a number that we are always trying to understand better and that we're trying to improve upon. New for this phase is that we are really looking to develop a set of metrics to evaluate the effectiveness of the organization and how we do our business. And so one of the things faculty are going to be very closely involved in is the creation of those evaluation metrics and participating in bringing an evaluation standard to the FDP as a whole. Another initiative of the faculty is that we are really interested in developing more scholarly style publication series. So it's something that's very nascent, but maybe tomorrow we'll be able to talk about that in our forum. Another cross-cutting activity is, of course, this whole representation to be able to bring the faculty perspective to the research activities that are going on, the research administration activities that are going on throughout the organization. We tomorrow will be talking about identifying faculty relevant activities and potential demonstrations that we might want to be involved in. And finally, we're always involved in engaging with the federal representatives. We often find that the federal representatives want to talk specifically to faculty about how different aspects of what they do are affecting us. So that just gives you a little flavor for what we're involved in. I will be happy to talk more about this. And I see there is one question in the chat, which I'll quickly address. It says, I'm the administrative rep from Princeton. Our faculty representative is hoping that virtual conferences are interactive and that there is an opportunity for robust back and forth on how burden may be reduced. Professor Marlowe is very interested in participating and it would be great for one of the faculty chairs to reach out to him directly. Thank you, Francine. I hope he will come to our session tomorrow because we're going to actually be having an interactive forum to talk about what our agenda for the next phase is going to be. I don't see other questions in the chat and I want to make sure we leave plenty of time for everyone else. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our next group.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Michelle. My name is Lori Schultz. I'm from the University of Arizona and I'm the university co-chair for the ERA, Electronic Research Administration Committee, along with David Saunders, who's our federal co-chair from the National Science Foundation. So can I get the next slide, please? So the ERA committee provides guidance for and support of ERA needs by identifying opportunities to reduce burden around the electronic systems that we use for federal grants activities. We provide institutional input and support to the development of improved electronic interfaces like grants.gov between the federal agencies and the research administration community. We also work inside the FDP to explore the use of technology for all FDP committees and work groups. The next slide, please. This next slide is a list of our members. I won't go through all of them, but I do want to call out a few people. There are a few people that I would like to thank and congratulate. First up is Mark Sweet, who is the past co-chair of the ERA committee, and also Debbie Nixon, who is the past co-chair of the Joint Application Design Group. Jim Kressel is the new JAD chair. And I'd also like to say thank you to Tammy Custer from Cornell University, who's been a longstanding member of the ERA committee and is rolling off for other responsibilities. So I know she's not here, but for anyone who knows Tammy, she will be missed and we thank her quite a lot. Next slide, please. So some of our goals for this new phase are to work more broadly with other FDP programmatic committees on demonstrations that have technological requirements. I mean, back when the ERA committee was formed, we were all still using Netscape and other browsers that don't exist anymore. And a lot of things have changed since then. And there is such a big assumption about how technology is going to support all of the things we do, from proposal submission through compliance to award closeout. Technology is a piece of our daily lives, regardless of what institution you're at or how large or how small. We'd also like to continue to leverage FDP membership to use and improve ScienceCV. ScienceCV is a demonstration that came out of the Federal Demonstration Partnership and is something that now we can use to create bio sketches for the NSF and the NIH for submission into grant applications. And your help in identifying areas of concern for improvement, telling us about how your user experience has been with ScienceCV is really, really important, because we can get that message to the folks who are building it. We do have a session on ScienceCV tomorrow afternoon at 4:30. I hope you'll be able to go. I referenced the Joint Application Design Group earlier. We're looking at growing that group to take advantage of their technical expertise beyond just grants.gov. So that group has been really critical in partnering with the grants.gov office in understanding, testing what information is coming out in and changes are coming out in additional releases of grants.gov, and including things like the grants.gov transformation project. So our group has been really helpful in making sure ERA members and FDP membership understands what's happening next with grants.gov, but we've got a lot of technical expertise to bear, and we're exploring how we can use that to move beyond grants.gov. The other thing is assisting FDP member schools with the unique entity identifier transition. So the DUNS to the UEI in SAM.gov is something that will be coming, although delayed by the pandemic. So we do have a session with the GSA this week. So if you're really interested in that, that is on Thursday at 3 p.m. And we've got GSA representatives coming to talk about that and what the revised timeline for the UEI is. Next slide, please. So I mentioned before that we definitely need your feedback on ScienceCV. We need you to attend these sessions, ask a lot of questions, send David and I email questions so that we understand what your concerns are. Same with the UEI. We have a project called the Federal Agency System Matrix, where we're keeping track of federal agency grant systems and the issues we're having so that we can work with FDP member agencies to resolve some of those things. And I believe that Richard Fenger will be here talking about the open government process later today, but there are a lot of things coming with regard to blockchain that could be very helpful with your input to understand how that is going to change our world through ERA. I mentioned also that Tammy Custer has left the ERA committee, so we will be having a call for membership, and we will work with the nomination committee to get that active so that you'll know when that's available to submit a nomination of yourself or someone else. And I think that's all I have, and can turn it over to the next committee.
Hi, Okay, the next committee up is Research Compliance Committee. I'm Melissa Kaur from the Director for Grants and Contracts at Harvard Medical School. And my federal agency co-chair for the Research Compliance Committee is Diane Dean from NIH. Next slide, please. The overarching goal of the Research Compliance Committee is to review existing and new administrative requirements imposed either by federal agencies or through program officers, program requirements related to research compliance, with an emphasis on harmonization of requirements across agencies and programs, reduction of administrative burden, while also ensuring best practices or good practice and compliance with ethical requirements. This includes human subjects protection, animal care and use, conflict of interest, export controls, data stewardship. At one point, we had a working group on lab safety. So whatever topics are of importance for the moment. Next slide, please. To give a little idea of the committee structure, because research compliance, if you remember the org chart that Alex and Michelle spoke to at the beginning of the session, research compliance is one of those committees that does have several relatively consistent standing subcommittees. So we have human subjects protection, which is co-chaired by Deborah Murphy, and we have a vacancy there. Jean McCutcheon had been the co-chair of that committee for a long time, and she has retired and rolled off that committee, so there's a vacancy there. Conflict of interest is co-chaired by Diane Dean at NIH and Mary Lee from Stanford. Animal care and use, co-chaired by Ara Tomasian from Harvard and Axel Wolf from NIH. Export controls, co-chaired by Doug Backman from University of Central Florida, with also a vacancy. And then data stewardship with 2 vacant co-chairs. Up until Alex talks to me about taking over the research compliance co-chair position from her. She's off to run the whole shebang. I had been the co-chair for data stewardship along with Ricky Queda from NIH. Rick retired in the spring, and we're looking for a replacement for him as a federal agency co-chair. And as I'm now the co-chair of the full committee, I'm also looking for a replacement for myself as a co-chair for that committee. Next slide, please. The goals of the Research Compliance Committee, as well as just a little bit about the progress that we've made over the past year that's leading to some of these goals, is to start with reviewing, from an overarching committee perspective, to start with reviewing the report from the Faculty Workload Survey to identify any gaps in the current committee or working group structure that between what faculty have identified as the most pressing issues for relief of administrative burden versus the issues that we are currently tackling with our committees and working groups. And use that discussion and use that feedback to develop a roadmap of priorities for this new phase. Develop new subcommittees or working groups if that's necessary to address those most pressing issues. So I'd like to invite everyone to join us for our session on Wednesday at 3 to 4 Eastern, where we'll be talking through some of these things. We're hoping for it to be a very interactive session where we talk a little bit about what the Faculty Workload Survey can tell us, but also a great opportunity for faculty, administrative, technical reps, anyone who's interested in research compliance areas to share where they think that FDP can be of help to our community. For our Human Subjects Protection Committee, one of the priority areas is the IRB exempt wizard, which has gone through a pilot and a second pilot phase, and we have some wonderful results. So we're hoping to move forward with posting the wizard for member organizations to download and develop a plan for sustainability of that tool. Just to give a little bit of background, the IRB exempt wizard in a nutshell is a tool that would allow faculty to self-determine by answering a set of questions whether or not their research qualifies for an exemption. The Conflict of Interest Committee, in addition to being a steadfast participant in the Foreign Influence Working Group, is also kicking off, or I think it's kicked it off a little bit, but still in the initial stages of a Conflict of Commitment Working Group that's co-chaired by Amanda Humphrey from Northeastern and Alice Young. And the goal of this group is to gather information on agency requirements and use that as a tool to advocate with our federal agency partners for greater consistency in these agency requirements, as well as, potentially as a tool for member organizations just to gain a better understanding of the similarities and differences. Export controls has also, there's a lot going on in that space, and it does tend to fall into the Foreign Influence Working Group category these days. Let's do a lot of things. So a lot of our export controls work has been rolled up into the larger Foreign Influence Working Group. Next slide, please. We have two pretty substantial working groups that are currently active under our Animal Care and Use Subcommittee. The first one is an IACUC MOU working group. And a shout out to Stephanie Scott, who had helped get this working group off the ground and has now rolled off for other FDP responsibilities. The current co-chairs now are Amanda Humphrey from Northeastern and Carrie Godin from Brown. And the goal here is to collaborate with the Subawards subcommittee, which we'll hear about a little bit more during the research administration update, to create a sample MOU and corresponding guidance so that we can codify each institution's roles and responsibilities in collaborative vertebrate animal research, while also reducing burden associated with that work. Over the past year, this working group has split off into two different subgroups, one to work on the sample MOU and a separate to work on the guidance, while also meeting together regularly to ensure consistency across those documents. Their goals for the upcoming year are to finalize those documents and hopefully obtain a great set of volunteer institutions to pilot those documents, as well as publishing the accompanying guidance for feedback. Just to give a little bit more information on how that usually works is that we would post to the relevant listserv. So in this case, because it's a collaboration between Subawards and Animal Care, likely we would post to both the Animal Care and the Subawards listserv those documents and solicit feedback by a certain date. And then that would go back to the working group, and the working group would review that feedback and try to incorporate it into the final documents. So a plug for the listservs. They're a great tool to be able to make sure that even if you're not participating in a working group, you have the ability to share your voice and provide your institution's experiences in helping FDP develop these tools so that it's most useful for everyone. Next slide, please. The other major working group right now under Animal Care and Use is CUSP, the Compliance Unit Standard Procedure. That's co-chaired by Aubrey Schoenblum at the University of Washington and Sally Thompson-Iritani, also of the University of Washington. And the overarching goal is to develop an online venue where participating institutions can share standardized procedures to aid in the development of animal care protocols. So where, I'm not an animal care expert, but where the same protocol or the same procedure is going to be used in multiple protocols, where one has been identified to be compliant and sound best practice, to make sure that that's out there to help researchers that may be less familiar with that procedure or haven't had to write it up in the past, streamline the writing of their protocols. They have a help desk that's live now and managing to receive emails. So it's cusp@thefdp.org. And I encourage anyone who's interested in this excellent project to join Julie Sharp from the University of California, San Francisco for a more detailed update on their efforts. That's going to be tomorrow, January 12th at 3 to 4 Eastern. Next slide, please. This working group has made a lot of excellent progress. They're in alpha testing right now for the system that they've developed. And this is the process where they're identifying major bugs, major usability issues, feature gaps, really looking for those major problems with the system so that they can be resolved before moving into the next phase. This phase is largely performed just by the tech team and just a couple testing institutions. David Wright, our very own FDP Executive Director, has been doing a lot of the work on the development with the system. And Scott Burry, Elaine Kim, Ellen Leidenheim, and Eva McGee have been doing a lot of the testing. They had a session recently at the fall 2020 AALAS national meeting to start getting the word out there about CUSP and its promise for reduction of administrative burden. And they're working on drafting the help page content. Next slide, please. Beta testing, so that second phase of testing where the system is open to a larger number of users and you're looking for those more fine bugs in the system, is anticipated to begin in Q1 of 2021. It'll include about 6 to 8 institutions and will also collect additional feedback that will help once we actually get to implementation. So this broader set of testers will help develop FAQs and other kind of help content. This is also the phase where business process and other supporting materials are being developed. And it's great news that they have completed the training of all of their testers, so they're getting ready to go. Next slide, please. Moving on to the Data Stewardship Subcommittee. Similarly, we have 2 major efforts under that subcommittee. And the first is the Data Transfer and Use Agreement, or DTUA working group. I had been co-chairing that working group with Martha Davis from Brandeis. But we're both also moving on to other responsibilities within the FDP. And so Diana Boglin and Chris McNitt have graciously agreed to become the new co-chairs of that working group, and they'll formally transition into that role closer to the end of this month. This is a collaboration with the Contracts Subcommittee under Research Administration, and we are looking by creating standardized templates and guidance to reduce the administrative burden associated with the sharing of data that cannot be made publicly available. We announced at the last meeting in September that we have recently published several new templates to the website. A reciprocal DTUA template, I guess I should take a step back. Our original template was just a single, a unidirectional template for use between 2 institutions where one is the provider of data and one is just the recipient of data. And we've published a reciprocal template that can be used when there's bidirectional flow of data between the 2 parties in the agreement, but it's still a 2-party agreement. A collaborative DTUA sample that can be used when there is more than 2 parties to the agreement that are all potentially sharing data with each other. And then a COVID-19 DTUA sample, which we hoped, going back to the plenary session that we had earlier today, might help reduce even further the administrative burden associated with sharing data for COVID-19 research. So this sample incorporates a few streamlining changes that some institutions may not be as willing to accept just yet in other research scenarios, but that we hope will help streamline the COVID-19 research. Our next steps here are to finalize an update to our FAQs to accommodate these new templates and samples that have been published. We're hoping to finish a first draft of that within this month to be shared with the community for feedback. And then once that's completed, to continue to refine the documents to meet everyone's needs. So we welcome any feedback folks might have on what template components, what data sharing scenarios, what resources would be of most help to your institution. Next slide, please. Also under data stewardship, I hope everyone has heard by now about the new final NIH policy for data management and sharing that was recently posted and will go into effect on January 25th, 2023. The Data Stewardship Committee has been having a lot of conversations and a number of sessions leading up to this to talk about how we can get ready for supporting our faculty in compliance with this policy while reducing the burden associated. So we're going to be looking at ways, now that the policy is actually posted, how can the subcommittee be of most use to our community? What resources would be helpful? Perhaps development of a set of FAQs related to costing and in collaboration with the finance audit and costing. And this is going to be a topic for the end of the contracts and data stewardship session that's going to be held on Wednesday, 11 to 12:30 Eastern. So if you have thoughts on how FDP can be helpful with implementation of that policy, I encourage you to join us at that session. Next slide, please. Just a little summary of some of the volunteer opportunities that we have and contact information for the folks that you can reach out to if you're interested in getting involved. If you're interested in research compliance, just generally, because who isn't interested in research compliance? Because it's the coolest thing ever. Feel free to reach out to me and we can talk about where your interests lie and where it might be most useful and interesting for you to get involved, and I can put you in touch. If you're interested in the IACUC MOU working group, either joining the MOU template or the guidance working groups, or interested in participating in the upcoming pilot, reach out to Amanda and Carrie, and their contact information is there on the slide, which we all have after the session. If you're interested in the DTUA working group, as we move into additional documents, or if you have suggestions for what that working group might want to work on next, please feel free to reach out to Diana and Chris. And then if you're interested in the data stewardship working group, please feel free to reach out to me. We are very likely to have some working group opportunities that come out of our discussions on the new NIH policy. And so with that, I don't see any questions that have been added to the Q&A. So I'm going to go on ahead and pass the baton on to emerging research institutions.
Yes, okay, good. It's great to be here. I'm glad to be able to talk to the membership and explain a little bit about what the Emerging Research Institution Committee does. As you see on the slide, I'm Susan Anderson. I'm the Director of the Office of Research and Grants Administration at the College of Charleston, and I have the title of Assistant Vice President for Research there. And my co-chair is Jamie French at the National Science Foundation. We are in conversation, she and I, because I believe she's going to be rolling off of that role, but she will be helping to onboard a fellow NSF staff member to become the new ERI co-chair with me. So next slide, please. So in phase 6, it was a milestone for our group because we did actually attain official FDP committee status. So much of the activity that we did during phase 6 consisted of actually having sessions led by federal agency officials to talk to us about either ERI specific programs at those agencies or information on how we could increase our competitiveness with these agencies. And these agencies included AFOSR, the National Academies, NIH and NSF, as well as USDA. If you go back to previous meetings posted on the FDP website, you can look at information that came from those sessions, and we found them to be very helpful. So now we're at the very beginning of phase 7, and our membership in the ERI institution group has nearly doubled to 48. And so I think this is a really good opportunity for us to communicate with each other and think about some of the things we want to do during phase 7. So our overall goals include encouraging and facilitating ERI representation in all of the FDP demonstrations, committees, working groups, You've heard, there's some really interesting and important activities that are being undertaken or that are ongoing. And so I would really encourage everyone to think about how you could apply what you're interested in and what your skill set is to the different opportunities to be involved. We're also going to continue to be broadening knowledge about ERIs that the ERI members, non-ERI members, and federal agency partners can gain from our participation in the activities of the FDP. And we'll be seeking additional federal agency participation in ERI activities. Next slide, please. So volunteer activities, volunteer opportunities include, as I said, being active participants in FDP demonstrations, working groups, subcommittees to represent your fellow ERI members and your institutions. Participate in ERI committee leadership. Assist with ERI virtual meetings between regular FDP meetings. Explore potential ERI activities and consider additional federal agency participation. So these are all things that you all can contribute to and play a role in, and I really encourage that. So my contact information is there. I've put the information for the ERI mailing list as well, the link on the FDP webpage that lists all of the mailing lists, including the ERI mailing list. And I encourage you to take advantage of that. Thank you. And I will turn it over to the next person.
Hi, everyone. I am Lynette Arias, and I am co-chair of the Research Administration Committee. I'm glad to be joining you. I do not currently have a federal co-chair. Wade Wargo has been our co-chair for the last number of years and has recently rolled off. So we are actually looking for a new federal co-chair, should anybody be interested. Next slide, please. So the goals of the Research Administration Committee, we're pretty much the pre-award committee. So we focus on the areas in the pre-award life cycle. So of course we're looking for opportunities to streamline things and make things work better in the areas of contracting, proposal, award, and subaward, and then any of the general areas that don't fall into any of the other committees as well. So this list here is the list of our current subcommittees, working groups, and initiatives. We're going to go through the majority of these today, and we're going to have either a co-chair or project manager from each of the groups talk about their specific area. So we have a subcommittee on open government, research administrative data, subawards, of course, everybody knows about, along with expanded clearinghouse. As Melissa said, she's going to give an update on contracts. And then over the last 6 months or so, we've started some discussion around specifically the proposal requirement stage of the life cycle and what we might be able to do to reduce burden there. I believe Jim Luther is going to give an update on the foreign influence working group after me. And then FACT has a session later this week, so we're not going to give any updates on that. Next slide, please. So these are all the members currently of our Research Admin Committee. Again, looking for a federal co-chair. Alice Young, as Michelle Masucci mentioned, is our faculty liaison. And then this whole list is everybody. We have the co-chairs of all the subcommittees and working groups that are on the committee, and then some at-large members. So it's likely that we'll add a couple more at-large members during this year. Next slide, please. So I will turn it over to Rick to talk about open government. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. I'm Rick Fenger from the University of Washington. I am one of 3 co-chairs on the Open Government Group. The Open Government Group was spawned from Data Act and even predecessor FADA around data challenges and what it looks like to make reporting more efficient, effective, and cost effective, knowing that our reporting was very expensive for everybody. So we've been looking at data as a part of our process and understanding what it looks like to use data to improve our cost effectiveness and that sort of thing. Next slide, please. So we're currently working off of these tenets at the moment, data-driven initiatives, trying to understand what the government is looking for in terms of data from us, and how to have a conversation around improving how data is delivered. There is new standards coming out as the government itself implements new transparency initiatives related to a lot of legislation. Those standards and their implementation is a part of what we review in hopes of supporting the best possible end for us and our partners, and that sort of thing, provide feedback to the government for improvements. Additionally, we make it a part of our group to ensure that we collaborate with other committees. So we're currently working on an effort around the letter of credit and assessing burden related to that specific process. So that is a post-award consideration, which means we've been speaking with the Finance Committee and we'll be presenting some more information at the Finance Committee session at 1 p.m. Eastern on Wednesday. Lori Schultz had already mentioned a connection to some of the modernization efforts that may or may not include blockchain. And then I think the UEI effort as well has a specific data consideration. It's a main data element going forward. Looks like we failed to update the slide here. Stephanie Andy is definitely at Brown University now, so she's no longer at Case. And then Avinash is our third co-chair with NSF, and just been really great for NSF's participation for a lot of our current activities. Our homepage and our presentations are out at the FDP website, and we are overdue for an update out there. We just didn't get to it this time around, but look for that in the future. Next slide, please. So specific to the letter of credit survey, from our last meeting in September, we have successfully launched a work group where we have about 12 participants. We've been meeting weekly to assess the LOC survey that we put out a while ago, and it's been a while, there's no doubt about it. We have challenges with COVID and some other priorities that kind of have extended our timeline that nobody's really necessarily comfortable with, but we are making progress, and this work group is a large part of that progress. The work group chose to break down into smaller groups and pull apart the survey into specific areas of interest, and have most recently shared back all of their findings. So we're going to switch over to the phase where we figure out how to cobble all the findings together into something coherent. And then we're shooting for having a draft report to this group at the next FDP in May. And then we'll know more about what we can do as far as officially submitting the report. Wanted to call out support from NSF as partners on both the analysis and the survey creation. They've dedicated some folks to really help us move some things along. So just wanted to call that out. Appreciate their efforts. Next slide, please. We have other activities. The LOC drawdown survey is meant to be one just really small exercise in trying to determine burden as a larger request from OMB to help them understand what the burden equation really looks like. Everybody says burden, but they don't really have a approach to an equation that helps them assess whether or not the burden's high, medium, or low, and then what to do about it when they can make that assessment. So LOC and our survey findings are supposed to help support some of that. And then once we've done it once, we're hopeful to be able to rinse and repeat on some other specific processes that we can, develop data for and develop a better understanding. I already mentioned the data standards a bit, but there is incorporation of data standards going on everywhere, and there's room for vetting and feedback. And we're trying to facilitate some of that. We have in the past submitted some real feedback, but there hasn't been many specific opportunities recently. So it's still there, just not particularly active, even though the agencies themselves with their modernization efforts are definitely including data standards. With some of the modernization efforts, everybody's been charged to make the process more effective and efficient. There are several initiatives out there. Some of them include the blockchain or the distributed ledger technology. but not all of them do. In any case, there's a couple live ones, and we are working with NSF on feedback for a process improvement that's specific to the drawdown process. And like I said, we'll be presenting a little bit more of that information at the finance meeting Thursday or Wednesday. We're continuing to monitor all the president's management agenda and CAP goals around data standards. So all of that can be found at performance.gov. They do have a January update to their action plans. And then I encourage you to take a look at the CUSMOs, which are quality service marketplaces, where they're trying to put together shared services that will help support our activities in a more cost-effective way. We'll continue to monitor all the legislation around these modernization efforts, especially around transparency and everything in the kind of post-Data Act world. One thing that came out of the Data Act world was a standardized notice of award. It came out just as we had September's meeting. And here at the University of Washington, we were really excited to get to know the standard notice of award better, because it was our hope that we would be able to see it as a quick step towards automation in terms of consuming the standard notice of award into our systems. That is still our hope. They have web services that are available to us, but in our initial startup on this effort, we found that we had some challenges that wasn't so straightforward, and that meant that we've got kind of deprioritized with some other things going on at the university locally. So it has been backburnered, unfortunately. I think everybody would love to be working on this first and foremost, but there's some other things going on that has taken our attention. So I don't know if any other institutions have had a chance to make any progress in this area. I know some other groups like the JAD are talking about this in relation to grants.gov and that sort of thing. So it would be really nice to figure out what everybody has going on. And I would encourage you to contact me on the side and see if we can organize some sort of discussion that brings everybody's latest thinking together, if there is an opportunity there. And then Lori Schultz had mentioned UEI. There's a key data point with the UEI and the swapping out of the DUNS. So from a data perspective, we would like to continue to partner with ERA and advance the understanding of the impact of this for all of us. And then any other data-driven efforts, we've got some ideas in mind, but we probably don't have all of them. So if there's any folks out there that have some data-driven type discussions that they would like to see unfold at the FDP, please contact us. That would be great. Next slide, please. So real quick, I wanted to thank all the LOC analysis volunteers. It's fun to watch a working group come together, and this one truly has. So we're just really enjoying going from what the heck are we going to do with this survey now that we have some feedback, and the folks that are digging into the details are just really making it fun to be a part of the conversation. Like I said, any ideas for future stuff is welcome. Any additional volunteers or participants are also welcome. You're more than welcome to contact any of the co-chairs if you'd like to talk. If there's something more general you want to get out to the community, then we do have our listserv address. Next slide, please. And here are our volunteers at the moment. You can see on the right-hand side, you have the original survey creators, and then we're in the analysis phase. So that's the rest of the folks. And then anybody that's in bold have done double duty for us. So we'd like to recognize and appreciate all their efforts and the institutions that are supporting them and helping us see this through. I think that's it.
Hi, my name is Amanda Humphrey. I am lucky enough to be one of the co-chairs of the Subawards subcommittee, and I'm from Northeastern University. Next slide, please. So our goal is to develop, maintain, and provide guidance for issuing and managing subawards under federally funded grants, cooperative agreements, and other funding mechanisms. We also generate tools and resources that will support efforts to reduce administrative burden related to processing and managing subawards. I am joined by my co-chairs Amanda Haymaker from Purdue University and Kevin Ritchie at Harvard Medical School. We currently have 7 active working groups, and those are all listed on our subcommittee webpage, which is different than the webpage that everyone has probably already been to, which is the Subaward forms webpage. So when the slides get posted, please follow this link or find us on the committee page of the FDP website. Next slide, please. So here's a list of what we achieved in 2020. We released updated subaward templates in December due to uniform guidance updates. And we're also in the process of releasing updated or revised guidance that will align with the changes that were made. I want to highlight that the only changes that were made to the subaward template were really around those that were required by uniform guidance, such as ensuring that any new clauses, such as the new 216 clause, needed to be added were added. Any updated citations were changed as needed. And so the guidance also has to go through that process as well. We released a new pilot human subjects data attachment 7. So Melissa Korf spoke earlier about the DTUA, and this human subjects data attachment 7 is something that institutions are able to use in lieu of a separate DTUA in some cases. And there's a lot more information about that on our Subawards forms page, and there'll be a forthcoming webinar where we'll talk about it more in detail. The Subawards and IACUC subcommittee created a working group that Melissa also spoke about earlier that is currently working on an MOU and a guidance document, hoping to streamline collaborations between our institutions. We've also planned a new member orientation, and as well as which will include, I guess, updates to the templates and also a section on the human subjects data attachment 7, and that will take place January 27th, 2021 from 2:30 to 4 p.m. It is free to all. We'll cover how to use the template updates, and the use of attachment 7. In addition, we will be cutting those videos into 3 30-minute videos and posting those to our website in the future, so that people, when you get new staff in, you can use those videos as a resource to help train. It's not just for new members, although the first 30 minutes is really going to be oriented to our new members. It could be anybody who is new to using the FDP templates. Next slide, please. The Subaward subcommittee, what do we have moving forward? So we're currently working on that IACUC MOU and guidance that we started in this past year. We've also been working on subcontract guidance to accompany the new sample, and we're analyzing data from the Subawards delay survey. And what we're hoping to gain from that is identify areas that cause delay in the issuance and execution of subawards and make recommendations for institutions to move forward. Our future initiatives we hope to include would be to engage some federal agencies on the use of potential collaboration templates, where there's perhaps a subrecipient relationship with a federal agency, and you need to be able to pay them, but they can't accept the FDP subaward template. We'd like to have a subaward template that institutions could use. So we've been thinking about that, and we're hoping to move that project forward. Next slide, please. We would love your contribution. So we have a lot of ongoing groups, the templates, the guidance groups. We have the analyzing subaward data data analysis group. So we've got a number of different opportunities to volunteer. If you email us at subawards@thefdp.org, we can either connect you with the working group leads to get onto a working group, or if you're not sure what working group you'd like to contribute to, we can always take a few minutes to talk to you and find out where your interests or expertise aligns with the needs of a particular working group at any time. I think that's it for me. Thank you very much, and Expanded Clearinghouse.
Hi, I'm Courtney Sweeney with UT Austin, and I'm one of the program project managers of the Expanded Clearinghouse, along with Denise Moody from the Boston VA Research Institute. Next slide, please. So the primary goal of the Expanded Clearinghouse was to create and maintain a single web-based repository for FDP entities and potentially others to enter and maintain and update their entity-related information so that pass-through entities can review all that necessary entity-level information without requiring additional forms over and over and over. And additionally, we can utilize available information from FDP member organizations that will help support other FDP activities overall. Next slide, please. Our co-chairs are Lynette Arias from the University of Washington and Pamela Webb from the University of Minnesota. Our subcommittee webpage is listed here. And then next slide, please. These are all of our subcommittee members. So we've got quite a few members. I'd also like to call out that we announced in September, we updated our email addresses. So we have two new email addresses. One's a system help and general questions. These are manned by our subcommittee members. So if you email either one of us will respond. Next slide, please. So right now we're primarily concerned with trying to get in additional phase 7 members. We have 200 members continuing on from phase 6. These stats are slightly updated. So we're still at 21 published. We now have pending updates, which are 6, and 9 have been submitted. So I have been emailing some stragglers. And so if you have not submitted, if you're a new member and have not submitted your profile, you'll be looking for an email from me really soon. Next slide, please. So some of our, what we're looking at doing right now, this coming year and beyond, is we want to complete onboarding all phase 7 members. So that is our primary focus right now. Shortly thereafter, we want to try to bring on an additional cohort of non-FDP members. We have over 100 interested entities. And so we are looking at how that might happen. We are also coordinating with the membership group on a membership database that is rolling up under an infrastructure systems group. So we are collaborating, we've got ongoing collaborations with that. Down the line, we'll be looking at completing or finalizing a financial questionnaire for non-single audit institutions. We've got several things in the pipeline for continued system enhancements. And then we will continue to engage with our European colleagues in developing their due diligence forms and online presence. And with that, I think I'm finished and on to contracts.
Hi, I'm Melissa Korf. I'm the Director of Grants and Contracts at Harvard Medical School, and I'm back again to talk about the wonderful world of contracts. Next slide, please. Current co-chairs are David Mayo from California Institute of Technology and myself. And we had previously been joined by Alex McEwen, who has rolled off as she has assumed the FDP co-chair role. She was a great co-chair of contracts, and I think with it from the beginning. So many thanks to her for everything she's done for the contracts community over her career. The goals of this committee are to identify common practices in contracts processing, design, monitor, and evaluate new procedures and concepts, taking a look at new FAR clauses as they roll out or they come out for public comment and talking through how they're going to impact the FDP community, study the similarities and differences between the grant and contract processes and identify whether or not consistency in those processes could help reduce administrative burden overall and generally provide a forum for discussion of current issues in contracting and possible resolutions. Next slide, please. So I talked a little bit earlier under the data stewardship update about the data transfer and use agreement working group. That is a collaborative activity between data stewardship and contracts. We also have another working group looking at other transaction authority or OTA agreements. That's co-chaired by Mike Kusiak from the University of California and Sarah White from the University of Tennessee Health Science Center. They recently completed a survey of the membership to gather information about member organizations' experiences and potential pain points with OTAs. And their next steps will be to use that survey data to complete a white paper on the topic, both just generally informative as well as, posing ways that burden associated with OTAs could be reduced. Next slide, please. Our newest and potentially all-consuming of the Contracts Committee endeavor is a reinvigoration of ye old troublesome clauses database. Some folks that have been members of the FDP for a while might remember this effort when it first began. And we're given some of the new challenges and the way that clauses, it's not the presence or the absence of the clause, it's a problem. It's, did you get the right information to accompany the clause? Was your CUI marked? Some of the challenges that might pop up with these clauses are a little bit more subtle and varied. So how can we take a look at reinvigorating that database into Troublesome Clauses 2.0 to both enhance the user experience of inputting and retrieving information, and also provide that flexibility to deal with some of the most sticky contracting issues that we have right now. As our first step, we've been working with our COGR colleagues who have received an information request from the DoD to gather some pilot information on CUI or covered defense information, as well as fundamental research negotiations in DoD contracts. And we'll likely run that with just sort of the smaller working group we have right now, but use that as a test case to help us think through development of the database as we move forward beyond this just initial planning phase. We're also planning to accompany the development of the database with user guide materials and just generally guidance materials that will help the community identify a problematic clause and explain a little bit about why it might be problematic, in addition to going hand in hand with the database, then asking for community members to share their experiences through the database. Next slide, please. So as you saw from the first slide, Alex has rolled off co-chair of the contract subcommittee. She's moving into her role as the co-chair of FDP. So there is a vacant co-chair position if anyone's interested. And as the Troublesome Clauses database moves beyond just this initial planning phase, we may have additional opportunities for working group members. And I'm keeping a running list of folks that are interested in those opportunities. So if you'd like to get on it, please feel to send me an email. My email address is there. And just generally, if you have any ideas for ways that the Contracts Committee can help make your contracting life easier, we would love to hear them. And with that, I think I'm going to pass it on to proposal initiatives.
Hi, I'm Amanda Haymaker. I'm the director of pre-award at Purdue University, and I'm one of the co-leads of this group. Lori Schultz is my other co-lead that you saw her earlier with the ERA group. Next slide, please. So this group is really just getting kicked off, as Lynette said. We're working to come up with a list of ideas and things that FDP can engage in related to proposal admin burden that we might be able to address some of those and come up with some initiatives to help reduce some of that burden. These may be focused on business processes and requirements. They might be focused on systems, which is why we have the tie-in with the ERA committee. have the potential to collaborate with many of the other FDP committees. As you can imagine, the faculty committee and others experience some of this burden as well, and may have some good ideas and thoughts that that could help us to move forward. And we also want to engage as much as we can with the various federal partners. Currently, we're working on just discussing and brainstorming what we should focus on and what our next steps will be, working to identify those areas of burden that I mentioned before, and come up with a running list of things that we can categorize and tackle. We're seeking interested volunteers for discussion groups. Anybody who has any interest in participating in those should reach out, and we will include you in those as we go forward in this coming year. Next slide, please. Last year, we did initially get involved in a few different things. Science CV was the first session that I participated in as sort of a representative of this group, and this is at the September meeting. Research.gov also reached out to have some discussions about some of the transition items they're working on to move everything from Fastlane to research.gov. So we gathered a group together to participate in a kind of a feedback session with NSF related to that. And then we've held a few sessions to brainstorm ideas and gather areas of focus for this group. So as I've mentioned before, we're going to host a series of Zoom meetings in the coming months to continue this brainstorming that hopefully will generate some really great ideas for us to move forward on, and then we'll work on priority setting and next steps of planning. With that, I'm going to turn it back to Lynette.
Next slide. I think we just have one more. So as you heard from everybody, and we have such a great team in Research Administration Committee, there's lots and lots of volunteer opportunities. There'll be a call for volunteers going out, but if anything piqued your interest, you can get in touch with any of the leads that spoke, any of the co-chairs of the committee, or myself. And here is my email. And now I'm handing off to Jim Luther, I believe.
Thanks, Lynette. Yeah, so I wanted to take just a couple of minutes and I think close out for the last committee report on the finance, costing, and audit policy. I'm Jim Luther from Duke University, the AVP of Finance and Compliance Officer, and I co-chair with Michelle Bowles, who is the Director of OPERA. Next slide, please. So these are the goals, the big picture goals to reduce administrative burden. That starred item in the middle is to look at opportunities, whether it be through the burden survey or other discussions with you all, as well as federal partners about reducing administrative burden, and then the harmonization of requirements. And we have had some recent discussions on that. And, in the discussions with our federal partners, we emphasize we don't always mean, but by harmony, we don't mean sameness. We don't mean the exact same policies, procedures, and guidance. Especially, we wouldn't want to harmonize on something more strict or more conservative if an agency has different mission, different objectives. But what we mean is kind of harmonized from the standpoint of definitions and principles and forms to the degree that we can. So we talk about those things as well. Next slide, please. We do have a number of existing working groups that have been around for some time. And those of you that participated in September, we've spent some time kind of talking about where we want to go in 2021. I'll briefly mention the foreign influence, which is joint with all the other committees. Pamela Webb and I co-chair that. We have a session tomorrow on that we're still kind of finalizing a number of aspects of that, because we've been working with the federal partners in a number of different settings, including something that we've referred to as kind of connecting the dots. And what we mean by that is when the federal guidance comes out and says there's certain things that we have to report in current and pending or other support or programmatic reports or the buyer sketch, how does an institution connect those dots to do it most effectively? So we'll be talking about that more tomorrow. We're hoping also to hear from Nate and possibly Rick on the letter of credit survey, and maybe BJ Pavanka on the procurement update as well. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, we used a thought exchange in September of 2020, and this is the question we asked. We wanted to get some input from the group as far as what were the things that were most significant in their world. Next slide, please. And this slide is kind of a summary of the response. Again, if you've seen the thought exchange, it gives the ability for individuals to kind of give unbiased feedback and kind of prioritize what they think is most important. And these were those items that came out. Next slide, please. I think this is my second to last slide, so I'll pause on this for a moment. This is what we are using as input for 2021. Michelle and I have had a number of discussions. We've had a committee meeting, but we're really trying to figure out how do we form around the various topics that are important to you all and to our federal partners. And I would imagine we'll end up having a reporting subcommittee, a closeout subcommittee, a direct costing subcommittee, a burden subcommittee. I don't know exactly what they'll be, but these are the items that you all have clearly stated as the most significant things. And last slide, please. And we'll be talking about many of these on Wednesday from 1 to 2:30. We're going to, as we all know in these COVID times, the last meeting was, I think, 80% of the time was Michelle and I talking with a little bit of feedback. We're hoping to flip it here and get a lot of feedback and make this a working session. We know that's difficult in this structure, but we hope to have a lot more discussion so that out of this meeting, we can identify the working groups and the subcommittees, get lots of volunteers, and kind of develop the structure to create some momentum to address the things that have come up in previous meetings. Happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Any questions for any of our presenters today? We have a few minutes. We've had some throughout and answered them, but always feel free if something comes up to follow up with some questions. Could we have their final slide, please? So I just wanted to, Michelle briefly mentioned, I just wanted to highlight the fact that through phase 7, we've created a new nominating working group. We have 2 co-chairs, Michael Kuziak and Jason Carter, who are going to help FDP and help all of our co-chairs. You heard about the vacancies and all the different opportunities. We want to make sure that everybody understands and knows how they can get involved. So you'll be hearing a lot more from this working group, including a call for volunteers even to be on this working group. So if you're interested, please reach out to me or to Michael or Jason or Michelle. We will be developing some materials to make it clear what types of opportunities are open, time commitments, depending on the type of activity that you might be participating in. And these volunteer opportunities run the gamut. So as Melissa pointed out, there's opening at the committee level for hers, subcommittee levels, and multiple different committees. You can work within as a leader there. You could also just ask to be a member, and we can talk to you about what that means to be a member and the level of commitment. And that's at the subcommittee level and working groups. We didn't talk a whole lot about working groups, but I'm thinking that even if you're new to FDP, you've heard a lot about the activities, and often the activity of a subcommittee, it takes place within the formation of a working group. So if you can head up a working group, you can participate in a working group. And then also we as a condition of membership, we encourage, to the extent that you can, participate in the demonstrations that are organized through working groups or other committees. So as I said, please stand by. You'll be receiving a call to the full membership listserv asking for volunteers for specific open opportunities, and I hope that you'll consider it. And again, just reach out to Michelle or me or to Michael or Jason if you have questions about any of those opportunities. And with that, I think we can conclude for our first day. I want to remind you that we do have a all-comers happy hour starting at 5:30 Eastern time, and I hope you'll join us. We'll have opportunities to have breakout sessions, and you'll be able to move between. It's nothing quite like being in person at the hotel in Washington, D.C. And again, I hope we can do that soon. But in the meantime, I look forward to seeing you virtually. So take care and have a great evening.